Alrighty, thank you for the introduction, Arina. And thank you everybody for sticking around. I realize I have the post-lunch last presentation, so you're here to the bitter end, and I appreciate it. So as Arina mentioned, first off, thank you for having me. Really nice to be here, excited to be here to chat with you today. As Arina mentioned, my background is in healthcare. I've spent the most of my career in the public healthcare space, specializing in quality improvement and patient safety, with a recent shift into the digital health realm. So really excited to be in this space and excited to speak with you today about co-design and design thinking. So today we'll be walking through, starting with exploring the health ecosystem. I'll give you a quick introduction to QoC Health and what we do, where we start, and then a bit of a deeper dive into some of the examples of solutions we've developed to date, and then a little bit on looking to the future and what the future might hold for healthcare and for you. Oops. So at QoC Health and in general in the healthcare system, what are we solving for? So first I want to start by exploring what the healthcare ecosystem looks like today. And to start though, I want to mention that healthcare is a dynamic, evolving, slowly evolving space to be in, and can be quite challenging at times because it does move at a bit of a slower pace than some of the other industries. And we often think of healthcare as a system, but I'd like to read the definition of a system for you, and you think about whether we're actually a system. So a system is defined as a set of things working together as parts of a mechanism or an interconnected network, a complex whole. So I think we have the complex whole piece figured out, and that's really what we are as a healthcare system, but we're really lacking that interconnectivity between systems and providers and people and organizations. And there's a lot of different factors contributing to that and different pieces in the current state that we're in. So there's a lot of work around and focus on wait times in the emergency department, particularly even here in Toronto over the winter months. Both sick kids in Toronto and CHEO in Ottawa, the Children's Hospital, had to put out advisories around the wait times to get into their emergency rooms. They were at full capacity for many of the weeks in the winter months. And that comes from a multitude of things. And even in the adult sector, there's long-term care homes and nursing homes the beds are full, they're at capacity. So that means that people are going to the emergency room to get care. And that has a lot of trickle-down effects there. There's a shift towards value-based care, which is a mode of delivery of healthcare, looking at tying the actions of healthcare organizations and clinicians to patient outcomes. So looking at what is the outcome of a certain treatment or surgery or care, and whether that's improving the patient well-being and health. There's a silver tsunami, some have coined it to be, which is the aging population. There's a shift in the demographics, and a lot of our baby boomer parents are getting older and living longer with chronic diseases, and disease management over time is a different conundrum that we're dealing with in healthcare. There's also this idea of the fact that we've created a sickness care system. So it's really reactive. We're not really looking at how do we keep people healthy over time? We're moving towards that, but it's more around how do we put the Band-Aid on and fix people when they're sick? So there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot of issues with transition from care from being pediatric to adult or from acute to rehab. There's a bunch of complex comorbidities. And there's caregiver and health and well-being. And a lot of focus recently, especially in the political side of healthcare, around patient engagement and how do we do that effectively. This has been a term it's a big buzzword for us in healthcare, but how do we do it in a genuine fashion? And last but not least, the one that I like to include in here as we look at different industries is that we still use fax machines in healthcare. It doesn't really quite make sense, but physicians and clinicians still send your prescriptions, in some cases, to pharmacies via fax machines. So you can imagine there's a lot of risk in patient safety issues and privacy issues. So seriously, I think we can move away from that. So with all those gaps, though, there are a lot of opportunities for improvement and innovation. And innovation can take on many different forms. So here's just a handful of things that are happening or have happened recently in the healthcare space. One that I'm really excited about is around remote surgeries. And this is a homegrown exciting story where a surgeon in Hamilton at St. Joe's Hospital is performing over 400 surgeries from Hamilton remotely across the world. So he's able to do that through robotics. So that's really, really cool. Artificial pancreas development, so there's a lot of pharmaceutical and medical device companies competing to get there first, but looking at developing a closed loop system so that folks with diabetes can monitor their glucose, but then also administer insulin and glucagon without having to track everything day to day. So you can imagine what kind of impact that'll have on somebody who's checking their glucose every time they eat something. A really big improvement in quality of life. One that is an innovation but really simple and low tech is the one on the far right, which is the theater cap challenge, where a UK surgeon simply started writing his name and his role on his surgery, his cap, to help avoid confusion in the operating room. And it's such a simple innovation, but it's really taking on a huge movement and following, especially on Twitter. You have other people even in Ontario doing this sort of thing. And it's just an example of really exciting innovation that is super simple, and it's kind of smack in your face like this is so simple. But there's a lot of confusion in the operating room, and it's a high stress, high fast-paced environment that knowing who is who and who you can turn to in a crisis is really important. There's a whole bunch of other ones that we've listed here, and one that you probably are familiar with, a lot of the big players moving into the healthcare space, Amazon, Apple, and all those folks. And the last one on the right is Figure One, which is a Toronto-based startup company where they've actually been able to create social networks, professional social networks in the clinical space where people can go on, clinicians can go on and review and provide feedback for medical cases, really complex or interesting medical cases. This is something previously that was done, it's such an archaic approach, but it's around, people sit around a table and talk about really complex medical cases, and now they're able to do that online across different jurisdictions. I think they're in many, many countries now. So this kind of speaks to both where tech can play a part and other areas where it's simple innovation. And so I want to go back to clinicians and just mention that, as you probably know, clinicians are really, really good at their job. They're really good at caring for patients and families. And they're fully immersed in the healthcare system, so they see where the gaps are better than any of us can, our patients as well. But they see where the gaps are, and they also see where the opportunities are, and they have these great ideas on how tech can be incorporated into care. And they can do that on little one-off pieces usually, but in those big hospital settings, typically, it's very difficult to build and scale and sustain digital health. So there's there's a lot of barriers. So there's technical expertise barriers. There's not a lot of that technical expertise sometimes in those organizations. There's a lack of design capacity and resources. A lot of the time, clinicians are strapped for time, and their main goal is to ensure that they're providing high quality, effective, efficient care to their patients. So the idea of having them develop tech on the side of the desk we can't really expect that from our clinicians. So supporting innovation is critical, and that's where I like to think of Edward Deming and his quote around, "A bad system will beat a good person every time." So we've cultivated a system that doesn't necessarily support innovation in the best way possible, and so how do we, as folks kind of on the periphery of healthcare, help to support innovation? And innovation is really necessary to fix systems that are inefficient, fragmented, and expensive. So that kind of comes back to that whole idea that our healthcare system is a bit of a non-system right now. And we want to innovate to help improve outcomes for patients and families first and foremost, help to coordinate care around the patient, and then also to manage cost. As you probably also know, the healthcare system is really expensive in Ontario and across Canada, and it's not really sustainable if we keep going the way that we're going. So how do we manage costs and find efficiencies there? And so now I'm going to talk about where QoC fits into all of this. We help connect patients and providers, usually using technology. And as a broader objective, we help healthcare organizations to accelerate their innovation and patient engagement using a scalable, secure, and flexible platform, a cloud-based platform. So we build fully customized, perfect fit solutions. We do this quickly and efficiently, and we have spent many years as a collective in healthcare. So as mentioned, I come from the healthcare space, but we also have tech experts and business experts and folks who have been in consulting roles and research. So we have various perspectives, and I think that plays on our last presentation around having diverse, empowered teams. We're a small but mighty team, and we pull in our different expertise to help solve problems and work with our clients. So this is a slide kind of indicating that secure platform I just spoke of. We have a secure cloud-based API, and this is the main infrastructure that all of our solutions are built upon. And so they have various features where the back end is really already kind of pre-made Lego blocks of features that you might be considering to build as a solution for your tech solution, and then the front end is fully customizable. So we never take anything that's fully formed and hand it to our client and say, here, use this, try to integrate it into your workflows or your processes. It's all around how do we meet the needs of our clients and our end users, and then using the features that we've already have developed. And our platform is, I think it's the next slide here, is PHIPAA and HIPAA compliant. So as you can imagine, similar to the banking industry, there's a lot of privacy concerns and security measures that we need to consider when we're building applications. And this is where I think a lot of the time clinicians are ready to go and build something, but then they hit this big barrier roadblock around privacy. And how do you build something that's and able to transfer data that's secure and ensuring that it's encrypted. So we have, our API is built on these parameters. And then we build solutions that connect. So we look at how do we connect the circles of care, the health systems, and home and community. So we're not, as a whole system, we're not quite there yet, but we try to take this lens when we build our solutions with our clients. And we strive for holistic solutions, so looking at the person as a whole, but really as an organization, healthcare is our focus. We build all sorts of different tech solutions, but healthcare is our niche. Technology is our foundation, and co-design is our DNA. So thinking about that design thinking and how do we co-design with our clients. So where do we start with all this? This is a lot of mumbo jumbo that I've been chatting about, all the healthcare acronyms, but where do we actually start? And so our focus really is to start with the outcomes and evaluation and the metrics piece. Because as we co-design, it's really important that we co-design in something that's grounded, and we try to ground our co-design in this Ihi Triple Aim. So the Institute of Healthcare Improvement put this triple aim out quite a few years ago around experience of care, so improving the patient experience and the provider experience, again, managing costs, looking at the cost of care and reducing in-person visits and readmissions, and population health, so improving patient self-management, the management of chronic diseases, and improving clinical outcomes. So the goal is to create solutions that address all three of these factors. A lot of the time you're lucky if you can tackle two, but when we design and think about what we're looking to build, it's really important that we have this framework in mind. And I find one thing that I really like about what we do is that we're not just going to build any tech solutions. We go to our client and talk to them and try to understand their needs, and then also ask how is this tech solution going to differ from the other ones that already exist? Because it's not a good use of anybody's time to build solutions that are just going to sit on a shelf or the hypothetical shelf of tech solutions. You want something that can actually be useful and have an impact. So again, our development is based in co-design. We create solutions that are meaningful to and meet the needs of the users. And the users will depend or differ based on the solution. So those clients or end users might be the clinicians looking to communicate with other clinicians, or it might be with the patients, or it might be with the caregivers. So there's a whole bunch of different ones, and really understanding who your end user is a critical piece for us. And we look at having experience, or we've gained experience working with patients and families, seniors primarily, who I haven't been as much involved in the co-design with the senior population, but I've heard some stories around some of the co-design that we've done in 91-year-olds blowing our minds about how much they understand about technology. So there's a lot of misinterpretations out there. We work with patients with physical and cognitive limitations, informal and formal caregivers, and a variety of healthcare providers. Next, I'm going to shift to how we think about patients, because primarily our goal is a lot of the tech solutions that we're developing the end user is the patient. So typically, how things are developed or thought about around in healthcare is who is the patient? It's by diagnosis. So do you have mental health issues? Do you have, have you just finished surgery? Do you have cancer? Are you a heart failure patient? Do you have COPD? Or it's by age, so having those buckets of the pediatric population versus senior population, or comorbidities, people who have multiple diseases. But as we started to co-design and really recognize where is the value, we started to realize that patients, overall, patients are really not those diseases, right? You're not a number, you're not part of the patient population. You're a mom, you're an uncle, you're a grandfather, you're a brother or sister, you're a professional or experienced, wise, caring, worried, anxious about different things, and what are your hobbies or interests? So really trying to hone in on that and where those interests or hobbies or what brings value to your life is really important. So developing patient-centered solutions means understanding who the person is, their needs, and what's important to them. And obviously we can't design a product for each person, but how do we incorporate some of the, if we're developing something in goal setting, is there a way for us to incorporate machine learning or AI to be able to develop plans that are more focused on what they're actually looking to achieve in their life? And just wanted to touch upon experience-based co-design and this little quote at the top. This comes from a political kind of origin, but healthcare has started to adopt this and around nothing about me without me, and so really having genuine patient engagement and understanding and respecting this piece in building things that are around the patient. So how do we incorporate meaningful engagement into our development? So let's take a closer look at some of the products that we've developed to date. So first we work with both public and private organizations, I should mention. So Women's College, which is just around the corner, we worked with them to develop a post-surgical monitoring application for folks with knee surgery reconstruction. And so 30-day post-surgery monitoring solution that improves patient outcomes by enabling them to self-manage in the home. So looking at how we can reduce the amount of visits in person to the hospital and improve the quality of care with this one. Next, we have again with Women's College, we've developed an application that's essentially a decision aid, so helping women who are pregnant determine whether or not they'd like to be taking antidepressants while they're pregnant. And with this, it was an interactive solution, and it helped women better understand the pros and cons of using this medication. A lot of the time, you go to the doctor and you might be overwhelmed, or you're not, you have 10 questions and you leave and you haven't asked any of them. So this application was really used to help provide information in a meaningful way and help them to make better decisions around their health and taking those medications if need be. The next one was around a breast reconstruction decision aid. So same sort of idea around decision making, helping patients to make better informed decisions about delayed breast reconstruction. And with this, this was really around helping women to make better decisions that result in longer term satisfaction with their decision there. We also work with the Canadian Armed Forces in developing their return to duty application. So they have quite an archaic approach to return to duty. It was very paper-based, and we were looking to work with them to develop a platform where injured or ill soldiers could engage and access clinical support, peer support, and have goal setting, so they're able to reintegrate, whether that be into service or into the community. And so this is an ongoing project that we're working on, and it was really looking at improving access to peer networks and ensuring that there's improved engagement so that the recovery process happens in a quicker way, but also a more meaningful and sustainable way. We've also developed a neurological assessment platform. So this looks at assisting healthcare professionals to identify a need for treatment, develop specific and targeted treatment plans, and provide a functional outcome measure for intervention. So this one I wanted to point out because this one is a little bit more related to the data analytics and visualization. With this, we're able to develop very specific dashboards around different cohorts. So looking at stroke patients or globally or heart disease and making those decisions. And lastly, we have a diabetes atlas. So this one was bit of more of an Instagram style approach to glucose monitoring and diabetes management using upload of photos and tracking your glucose levels. So this resulted in increased engagement as users could track their meals and glucose levels using familiar photo capabilities of their mobile devices. So really the interconnectivity with the devices that already exist, and visualizations of their meal photographs and glucose readings provided simplified comprehension of how to manage their glucose. So I'm gonna pause here for a moment. I think our next slide is around, oh, we have one more. And then I'll get to the point that I was gonna make. So with North York General, we're working on some goal setting. And this one incorporates a bit more of machine learning into this application. So it's called Keep Well, and it's helping the older population with multiple chronic conditions. So they have an interactive experience with this avatar lovely lady on the screen to help empower patients to create action plans and goals. And so they work with their providers to set goals and then check in and track those goals over time. There's health coaching incorporated and reviewing of those improved patient outcomes. And this helps older adults set their own health priorities and goals in context of multiple chronic health conditions. So again, that silver tsunami we spoke about a little bit earlier. All that said, I'm gonna pause, as mentioned, and with the app kind of space in digital health, it's really an interesting space to be in because there's so many that are being developed, but it's hard to penetrate into the healthcare system. There's so many barriers that are in place. But there's over 170,000 apps on iOS and Android in the health space. But not all of them are really that useful. So just as an exercise, since we don't have we're a small group today, how many of you go onto a social media app at least once a day on your phone? Instagram, Twitter. Okay, how many of you use a health-related app like Fitbit or something once a day? A couple less. And anybody use an app on their phone to monitor? We're a really young group here, so I doubt that this might not be the case, but to track any symptoms or goal setting around your health. Yeah, so it kind of shows that there's this huge opportunity for us to develop these apps that are meaningful, and there's the social media side that's really been successful. How do we integrate that into the health side and make it more interactive and easy to use and almost, I don't want to get people addicted to a health app, but like how do we leverage that and look at that when we start to develop apps? And so we've started when we work with our clients, we try to create things that are relatively simple so that we can develop things that people actually want to use. That's another piece that we find, that a lot of the health apps are, if you have to log in every 10 seconds to actually access it, or if you have to input every single piece of information, how do we integrate those into the wearable devices that are already existing, or make it so that you're not having to input things and there's a little bit more value add for you to use the apps. Don't know that we can integrate any shopping features into health apps just yet, though, like Instagram. So looking to the future, what are we doing around data analytics and visualization? Ugh, I need another coffee. So what we're doing is we have an immense amount of data that we collect with our apps, and they're all secure and separate from each other. But how do we use the data that we're collecting and tell effective stories? There's a lot of information that is really meaningful, but also some that is at the periphery. So how do we build analytic dashboards and then visualize that data to tell the story and show the value or impact of apps that we're developing, and both what we're developing and outside of what we're developing. And so we're working on that to build that out at this point, and some of those applications or tech solutions that I mentioned a little bit earlier, those are we're starting to look at the data that's being collected and how we actually use that data and working with those clients. One thing that I would like to mention, particularly with our public sector clients, the hospitals and different clinical researchers, we partner with them to join in on different research studies. And so we're able to, these are a bit longer term goals, but we've partnered with quite a few of our clinicians to look at how we actually measure the effectiveness and efficiency of those apps and the value add that we're adding to the end user. And so, for instance, the post-surgical piece, we've partnered with a surgeon at Women's College and we have quite a few articles at this point around that piece, like the value add. So it takes a bit more time to do those research studies, but it's worthwhile because we're able to incorporate a rigorous approach from a scientific perspective around what is the value add of these applications. So as we build for the future and healthcare continues to evolve, we're starting to think a lot about where does tech fit into that landscape? Where does tech fit into family engagement? Where does tech fit into patient monitoring and blockchain? There's a lot of preventative health measures now and different organizations that are looking at that piece. Where does QoC, our organization, fit into this landscape? And maybe you want to start thinking about where you fit in if you're really interested in the healthcare space. How do you marry the tech side and the healthcare side and data analytics to better the quality of care that we're providing? And last but not least, I want to end on a Spider-Man quote. So with great power comes great responsibility. So as you venture into this realm of data visualization and analytics, your enthusiasm and desire to help, it comes with a great responsibility. And so remember to think critically, innovate responsibly, and have a lot of fun. I'll end on that and take any questions. I know it's the end of the day, so it's hard to.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. I just wanted to mention that Dr. John Semple is an alum of OCAD University, and he's, of course, the collaborator on the post-surgical application.
Mm-hmm.
And he was our former board chair. But, you know, he's somebody who is, and for the students here are figuring out their next steps, I mean, he's somebody who really felt that the combination of creativity and design and healthcare and invention all are a kind of virtuous circle. So I think there's great opportunities in health right now to really bring design thinking and creativity into sometimes very troubled environment that needs a lot of healing itself to be more efficient and serve people better.
Very true. I think that there's a much bigger appetite, I think, now more than ever to think about how we incorporate design thinking and tech into healthcare, because the frustrations are real. You know, clinicians are just trying to provide the best care possible, and there's a lot of roadblocks to that. So technology won't solve everything, but it might be able to alleviate some of those issues that arise or the gaps that exist or minimize those gaps. So how do we use tech in that, or leverage tech in that space? But John Semple is a great one. He's the one who we have a bunch of research studies with them, so thanks for pointing that out.
So for someone who wanted to develop some kind of application to implement in the healthcare field, it seems really intimidating to sort of jump through all the hurdles.
Yep.
But I think part of it is just that I don't know a lot about it. I was wondering if you could maybe explain what kind of process you would need to go through if you develop some kind of app or software that you wanted to be able to market or implement or partner with a provincial health authority or something similar.
So I would love to answer that question. I'm going to do my very best. I also should mention that I am about 2 months into this role, so very new to the digital health space, and I'm not the one navigating those waters just yet, but I know that there's a lot of different pieces that need to be considered, and that's where the work that we do really helps, because we can partner with those providers and healthcare, anybody who's looking to create an app, and look at those, because we do have that expertise in the team. There is one of the biggest barriers is the privacy piece. So looking to make sure that whatever application you're developing is PHIPAA, or where it's developed, or the infrastructure behind it, that it's PHIPAA or HIPAA compliant. So in Ontario, there's the Privacy and Information Act that you need to be compliant with and ensure that the patient information is de-identified, essentially. So when it's being transferred or any sort of data collection, that it's very secure, and it's not, you can't tie somebody's responses or goal setting to their actual name. So having a secure database or infrastructure in the background is really important. The encryption piece as well. And then looking at if you're looking to integrate into an electronic medical record or a medical system in the larger healthcare organizations, a lot of the time it's around how do you actually sit on top of those platforms and how do we make sure that they can speak to that platform. Again, that is my lingo. I'm not as tech lingo savvy just yet, but there's a lot of different technical features that need to be considered to build those applications. And then looking at how do you build from kind of a local environment to a production or live environment, and ensuring that the system, there's no breaks or blockers in those systems. So.
Thank you.
Could you comment on the use of machine learning in healthcare, whereas you kind of lose, there's no culpability in machine learning, because let's say something goes wrong, and also there's no transparency. So how does that affect healthcare?
I think there's a really interesting space. So the machine learning, blockchain, and AI are definitely buzzwords now in healthcare. People are just like, oh, we're going to just toss some blockchain in there and it's going to work, right? And there's a lot of ramifications and things that I think are going to come out of that from an ethical perspective as well. So I think that machine learning is starting to penetrate into the system, or non-system of healthcare, where there are applications or solutions that are being developed that take kind of the input, somebody's input, and then develop certain plans based on those, using machine learning based on that information, and building more customized care. So like looking at personalized medicine, and incorporating machine learning into that space. But I think that it's a really interesting time to see that happen, and I think Toronto in particular is a really great jurisdiction to be in, because there's a lot of startups looking at that and how we actually incorporate that into the work that we do. So it's something that I'm certainly interested in, and don't know as much as I'd like to about it, but it's definitely being talked about, and people are trying to figure out how to do that in an ethical and privacy sensitive way, right? And same with the blockchain piece, right? And the transparency is huge, especially as we move more and more towards patient engagement and the idea, well, the idea that your health record is your health record, right? So how do we make sure that it's transparent and you're able to actually access it? So there's a whole whackload of work to be done in that space. So thanks for your question.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you. I was just wondering, do QoC develop any devices themselves, or do you try to make applications that are compatible with devices? Like you mentioned, the artificial pancreas.
Oh, yes, yeah. So we develop technology solutions. We don't develop the devices at this point.
Yeah.
We focus on the technology side of things. So we can develop applications that are primarily web-based, so a web portal, or a mobile portal, so iOS or Android, or both, but we don't look to, at this point, to develop devices. The device area is a whole other realm that's quite exciting too, but places like Medtronic or different medical device companies are working towards that artificial pancreas development. So that's another one, if you are really interested in that piece. There's a lot of, I think there's some folks in BC that are working towards that, and then in New York as well, it's a bit of a race to the finish line to see who actually gets it FDA approved, and then also like into the hands of patients. But we're not in that realm just yet. So.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other
Thank you.
Thank you very much.